I'm Anna Drake-Warshaw. I'm the Director of Partnerships, Learning, and Evaluation for the UIA, and I'm honored to get to moderate a conversation among several of our leads and experts on the completion grant. We have with us Susan Klusmeyer from the University of Kansas, Renata Opazinski from Michigan State University, Dana Pagan from the University of Central Florida, and Roberta Johnson from Iowa State University, who I think is going to have to leave out to go celebrate a new grandchild midway through, and is going to be supported by Darcy Sprouse, also from Iowa State. So I am just going to guide the panelists through a series of questions, and we will have a few minutes at the end, I hope, for you all to suggest questions via the chat, and then we can have our panelists respond to those. So first, can you tell me a little bit about what you've learned about student financial needs on your campuses as a result of the project, and how this project has influenced other aid programs on your campus?
So I will start from Iowa State University, and one of the things that has happened as a result of the completion grant program on our campus is that it has enabled a broader conversation, first and foremost, about the plight of students who are very close to graduation but are unable to do so for relatively small balances that have occurred that perhaps were unforeseen. As a result, our president has carried this banner as a priority to our foundation, and we are working with them to generate even more funds to assist students who find themselves in difficult situations. So it's been very helpful for us to be able to partner with our college representatives when they are visiting with a student who's having those difficulties, and to potentially leverage some of the dollars that the colleges have available through various completion grant dollars, as well as what we have available in financial aid. So together we're working collaboratively to assist our students to stay enrolled and finish.
Yep, so this is Susan Klusmeyer. I am the Vice Provost for Academic Success at the University of Kansas. I think there were two big things for us that we learned. First and foremost was really that our students had a higher need threshold than we were able to deliver with the completion grant, and we were also finding that the funding that they needed was coming earlier in their academic career, and so we didn't have as many students that met the parameters towards the end of their career applying for funds. But in addition to that, we recognized we had lots of pots of money all over campus that were being distributed to students. And depending on who you asked, if you were a student, you might get directed to one fund or over another. And so we spent a lot of time working to pull this group of funds together and fund managers to talk through how we might collaborate together to maximize the dollars that were available to students, and to help students really get to the dollars that might be eligible to them soon. And so we created what we call our emergency aid network, and we established that about a year and a half ago, and really launched a joint application and a joint review process. We use that through our help.ku.edu website. And that's been something that's been really instrumental and helpful for us in understanding not only what our students are seeking funds for and how do you define emergency, but also how can we make sure when we are working with donors that we are able to very clearly articulate where our students have need and where those trends and patterns are.
So I'm Dana Pagan again at the University of Central Florida. So at the University of Florida, highlighted kind of the issue of financial support for some of our programs for the completion grants and for the emergency grant funding. Students made decisions early on in their academic career that they don't realize impact them so much later on and could potentially prevent them from enrolling in their final semester or actually graduating. So we need to really kind of work holistically across the campus as a community to work with these students to identify the right classes they need to take, to help them progress towards degree completion, and then ensure that they have the funding sources available for them.
And I'm glad I asked you to say it again, because what I was going to share builds off of that so well. So for us, one of the things that MSU did is we have advisors make our actual phone calls. So that what we learned is that a lot of the financial needs are not necessary. So we actually call, that's the other thing. I know not all campuses call. We actually call our students directly to let them know about this grant. And in that phone call, the script that the advisors use is very holistic. Let's check in. How are you doing? What are your needs? And that way, when they hear some of these other holistic needs, not just, okay, I need to pay my tuition, but I'm having trouble finding housing. I don't have enough money to buy food. The advisors are able to get them connected to whatever resources it is, as well as on the academic side, since it's an advisor calling. If they have questions about, well, what courses do I need to graduate? They're able to have those conversations right then and there.
So can you tell me a little bit about how and why you changed or adapted the timing of your completion grants as the project advanced? I know this is something that we learned a lot about as we navigated through the project. And I think you guys, I know, have some good examples of how and how you adapted.
I will say at the University of Central Florida, we attempted to identify kind of a very impactful timeframe for students. Our first round of funding, we awarded way too late in the semester. Time frame, when we pushed it back to actually right when the tuition was due, we were able to capture students who were more engaged in their classes, more actually engaged in willing to move forward and continue with classes.
So for Michigan State, we have 3 times. So students are able to pay their tuition up front, or they're allowed to go on a payment plan, which has 3 times that payment is due. We originally did our grant at the end of the 3rd payment plan. And retroactively, we realized that wasn't the right time we run ours as an RCT. So we have a control group and a treatment group. And when we did some quick analysis, we realized that it didn't have much of an impact. So then we went and got other data. We talked with students, we got some qualitative data, and then we also ran some specific numbers, which we should have like in hindsight, we should have done this at the start, but we ran some numbers around what date of the semester our students actually dropped for non-payment. And when we ran that analysis, we realized that that second payment point seemed to really be the pain point, so to speak, that's when students were getting dropped. That's when we were losing a lot of our enrollment. And so we moved our grant up to that second payment deadline, and that seems to have made a huge impact for our students. And we're really seeing that that was the right timing. So what I would say is, think about what data you have and try and analyze that before you start. You'll, like we were saying, a lot of us had to change it after the fact, but I think if we had done that analysis at the start, we would have started with a better timing frame.
Thanks.
Iowa State was very, very similar to Michigan State in that we have a similar payment structure, and students can pay in 3 installments. And so we assumed, obviously, that if they hadn't made their 3rd payment, that they were having difficulty. And of course, that was the barrier for them being able to register for a subsequent semester. So after the first go round with that, we had also done one other thing that turned out to be something that was not fruitful. And that was, we wanted to confirm that our students were actually on track to graduate. And so we ran degree audits on every student that we'd identified that was in the cohort of individuals who we thought was eligible for the award. Unfortunately, that took a great deal of time. And so it was almost the end of the semester before we were able to actually make the awards for our students, which was very, very late. So similar to Michigan State, we did back that up to our 2nd payment date. And we eliminated the requirement for degree audits for students because that just took too much time. The one thing we did do, however, that I think turned out to be beneficial is we did require our students to come in and visit with one of our financial literacy counselors so that they could have one-on-one conversations, go over their financial aid package for the subsequent term, and make sure that they understood and had everything in order for the next term, so that they didn't find themselves in a situation toward the end of that final term or next to final term in a similar predicament where they were unable to pay their bill for the term and then register for the next one. So that part did turn out to be a good maneuver on our part.
I would say similar to what Michigan State and Iowa State shared, we at KU had multiple points at which a student could potentially pay. And so we tried all of those points to see which one might work best. The other thing we found, especially for our students in their final semester, because it would take us a little bit of time to review degree audits, making sure the student really did meet the parameters, by the time we went to apply funds, in some instances we'd find the student had paid off their balance. And so for us at KU, we never really found the sweet spot. But I think, my advice would be make sure you have complete clarity around how your billing cycle works. We are not an institution that drops a student for non-payment. We will put a hold on their account so they can't enroll in courses for the next semester. And so that, again, just becomes another space where making sure you have clarity and know where there might be a point at which you could support a student or really get a clear snapshot in time. And if that's not the case, which was for us, really making sure you can hold firm as to why that's the particular moment in time you've picked to review a student's account and then apply funds.
Great. All right. So we have time for maybe 2 questions more. I'm gonna see how we do. So we talked a little bit about this in the opening session. It was really helpful to hear about. How has the completion grant project informed or influenced your campus's ability to provide COVID support? Or how do you anticipate that it might in the future?
At Iowa State, this has been enormously helpful. It enabled us to develop a rapid response for how we wanted to utilize our CARES Act funding, as well as we swept in a variety of other sources that we have available, including some generous funds from additional funders through the UIA, which we wrapped into a single application. So students who indicated that they are challenged with any sort of COVID-19 related expenses can utilize one single application form. On the backside, we are then sifting and sorting and determining which of our funding streams is going to best meet their needs. So it might be CARES Act. If they qualify for that, we've identified some funds for some of our international students. The ECMC and Course Hero dollars through the UIA are going to be utilized, and our graduate college also kicked in some money for graduate students. So we're feeling pretty excited about that. And in addition, early on in our endeavors, our athletic department contributed a very sizable amount of money to us to be utilized for completion grants. And so we're also able to tap into those dollars. So all of it's being put in one giant basket and been very helpful. And with that, I will have to say farewell. But Darcy Sprouse is going to step in and cover for me for the remainder of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roberta. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So I can jump in from the KU perspective on this. This has been immensely helpful. And like I said, we had done some work to establish our emergency aid network, and creating a shared application and distribution of fund process has helped because of the amount of traffic we've seen to the site prior to the CARES Act fund being available to students. And then from that point, we were able to use that common application and kind of pare it down a little bit to make it easier for students to then use it to distribute the additional CARES Act fund. I think most importantly, it's allowed us to track to see which of our funds are being depleted and then where we have pockets of students that we haven't been able to serve. As you can imagine, many of the funds that we have different parameters and we're able then to award it to different populations of students. But we identified international students and our DACA students in particular that really were not covered under a majority of the funds the way they were written. And so as we've sought additional funding, whether it's from donors or even through opportunities through the UIA, that's been a point of clarity for us. And so I think having that shared process and being able to track has been instrumental in making sure we're able to find enough funding to cover as much of the need as we possibly can for our students right now.
At MSU, it's been similar. So what was most important was we had that network established because we had the same core group that's been doing completion grants for years now. So when our provost said that she wanted to pay off balances of students to try and encourage enrollment, so as a way of triaging MELT, sort of for returning students MELT, in 48 hours, we were able to turn that around. She told us we had the funds, and we just went through the same process we always do. At the same time, one of the things that's been, I just feel I need to note, I guess, here is for us, for the completion grants, we pay off tuition balances and then things like library, past due balances or lost books, parking tickets, health balances, those sort of things. And while that is a need right now our students have, what we're hearing from our students is that most of the financial needs they have wouldn't show up in any of those balance dues. So while it's helped us have that connection and resources and be able to move, I don't think we've been able to utilize it the way some other campuses have. For us, when we were distributing our emergency aid related to COVID, we did an application, had students kind of express what those concerns were, and that reiterated the data we had seen before, that most of the students' needs were things that we would not have seen on a balance sheet anywhere, or a debt sheet or anything like that.
At the University of Central Florida, due to COVID, we do expect a drastic increase for this upcoming semesters and moving forward for the next couple of years, as students who are furloughed attempt to come back to school and complete their degrees, and then for some of our continuing students also to come back and attempt to complete their degrees while facing other emergency situations or dire situations. It also highlights kind of the different areas of, as Renetta had kind of explained, the different pockets that we need. So some, emergency funding for tuition, some emergency funding for costs outside of tuition or outside of typical things that we consider for potentially due to food or housing or anything like that, which is very separate from what we would consider with the completion grant.
Thanks, Dana. All right, so we are up against time, but I want to transition us to the next panel, which is going to involve some thinking about how you help campuses get started and what information you share with them to help them implement a completion grant. So the last question I want to ask each of you to answer in a sentence, a short sentence, if you might. What is the first thing that you would have a campus do, that you would suggest a campus do as a first step if they are going to develop and implement a completion grants program?
I'll go first. I would say the first thing is to identify where your need is.
Good sentence, short, I love it.
I can go next. So University of Central Florida, I would suggest know your data and know your partners. You want to make sure that this information is reliable, very clean, and very consistent.
I can go next. This is Darcy at Iowa State. I would just echo what Dana and Susan have said, in that you have to look at your own data, develop criteria based on what makes sense for your institution, whether it's looking at transfer students or out-of-state students, whatever that may be. Just know what you need and what works best for you.
It's going to be a broken record. Data. My soapbox, mixed method data. Look at the numbers, but also talk to your students. Get the stories from them as well.
Okay, well, I want to thank our panelists very, very much for sharing the insight that they have gained through their work in this project. It's hard work, and they've been really thoughtful and great engaged partners on their campuses. So thank you for sharing your thoughts today.